Hi there everyone, welcome back to Dandelion Delphi tutorials. Today we're going to look at the OOP question, the object-oriented programming question, but we're just going to look at question 3.1 of final of 2019 so that we can complete the class before we move on to question 3.2. So let's look at a typical question 3 from the final of 2018 and 19 and onwards. Before those, that would be your question 2. You will see that before the question starts, there is an explanation of the object class tPlayer, and some of the attributes are then described in a table. These attributes are also referred to as fields, and you'll see that their names start with F. And it's important to take note of the description of what they are holding. The first name we would assume would be a string, and then the weight of the player could either be real or integer, and that is something that you need to check. And then a score achieved by each rugby player. So before you start your exam, just open your class and have a look to see what are these fields, what are their data types, and sometimes there are even some of the methods declared and completed for you. So question 3.1.1 is starting with a constructor, and you want to start with your class and complete your questions from top to bottom. Here it's really important to read properly. Let's look at the constructor. Here they say that the constructor will receive. The moment you see the word receive, that means that there's a parameter or maybe more. For this constructor, we're receiving the player's name as well as their weight as parameter values. It's important to note that you do not have to receive parameters for each of your attributes or fields. You can see here that these two parameter values needs to be assigned to the respective attributes, and that would be if name and if weight. But then the score we're not receiving as a parameter, but we are going to set this value to 0. So press pause and try this yourself before you look at the memo. We'll do one question at a time. We're now only looking at our constructor here. You should create only one method at a time. Our constructor we usually call create, and we are receiving parameters for the name as well as the weight. These parameters now you need to match with the data type that they are going to be assigned to. So the name of the player string, and therefore P name here is a string. And the weight is real because F weight of the player is real. Once you are done with your constructor signature at the top, you can push Ctrl-Shift-C, and that will open the skeleton code. So you will see your constructor with the beginning and end, and this will be empty when you create it. And all we need to do here is assign the parameter values to their respective attributes. So very important is that your attributes are on the left. They're going to start with F. So make sure that you remember the parameters on the right and fields on the left. Remember F is before P in the alphabet, so that always goes first. And then the weight is assigned to F weight, and we were asked to assign F score to a 0 in our constructor. So let's have a look at the next question 3.1.2. We are required to write an accessor method called getScore. An accessor method is always a function, and it will always be public. Your constructor will also always be public, as both of these will be called by your main form. So what this function is going to do is return the value of sScore to our main form. Remember encapsulation. Our fields and attributes are declared under private, and that means they are encapsulated, which means they can only be accessed by that class unit. In order to give my main form access to them, I write an accessor function. Our question didn't indicate that we're receiving any values, and accessors don't receive values. So therefore I have my function getScore, colon and then integer. Remember, your functions always need a data type. So that is an integer value, and this data type will match the field that it is returning. So since it's returning f-score and f-score is an integer, getScore must also be an integer. Once you are done with this signature here, then you push Ctrl-Shift-C and you complete the code. So here's my getScore function, my accessor method. And it is as simple as assigning f-score to my result. Remember, your function always has to have a result, and the result matches the data type of this function. So I'm returning f-score, and f-score is an integer, which is assigned to result. Question 3.1.3 needs us to write a method that will receive, there we go, we have a parameter, an integer value as a parameter. And this value needs to be added to our f-score attribute. Nowhere in this question is it indicating that this method must return a value. So if the word return or result does not appear in your question, you know that it's a procedure. Press pause and try this yourself. So here is my signature for update score. It's a procedure and it's receiving an integer value because I'm going to add it to my f-score. So in order to add it to the current f-score, it will have to be an integer because f-score is an integer. There's no result data type for procedures. So it just ends there with a semicolon. Once you've done the signature, you then press Ctrl-Shift-C and you complete the code then for update score. Here you can see I am taking the current score and I'm adding this parameter value to the current score and assigning that answer to my field or my attribute called f-score. Question 3.1.4 is asking us to write a method, again, that will receive, there's my parameter, the height of the player, and then calculate and return. The word return is showing me that it's a function. It is returning my BMI, so that would be my result. And here I can see the formula that I have to use to calculate this BMI. Remember, every function has a result data type. So the result data type would be my BMI, and since I'm using the divide here, that means this BMI or the result of this method will be real. Here is the signature for the calculate BMI method. It's a function that receives the height as a parameter, and it's going to return the BMI, which is a real data type. Ctrl-Shift-C, and here is the formula that I applied using Delphi code. So it was the weight of the player that already received a value in my constructor create. Remember, your create will run first, and the parameter p-weight gave if weight of player a value. So when you are creating this calculate BMI function, you may assume that the weight of the player will have a value. And then I'm dividing by the square of their height, which is the parameter I received. And my function has a result, and the result is real, and this would be my BMI that it returns. Now you're going to try and do 3.1.5, a method called eligible for selection. And we're going to use f-score to determine what message it should return. You will see at the bottom here the method must return the relevant message. So we know that this method is a function and it's returning this message here, which is string. So we also know that the result or the return data type of my function will need to be string. Nowhere in this question is it indicating that I'm receiving a value, so therefore this function will have no parameters. In a paper anywhere, does not matter whether it is this question or any other question, when you see a table like this is often an indication for you to either use a case statement, which I can use because f-score is an integer and case needs ordinal data type of which integer is 1. Or you could also use a nested if. So this is the signature for my function. Very simple, no parameters and a string data type. And then when you're ready, you push Ctrl-Shift-C. And this is how I completed mine, even though there are many possible solutions. I just wanted to show you that you can use result as you would any other variable. So I'm setting my result to a low possibility. If the score is more than 14, I'm changing it then to a high possibility. Else if the score is 8 or more, very important is that 8 is included in here, then I will change the result to medium possibility. And the result is now a string data type. I am assigning a string to the result, so my function will return an answer. And the last part of question 3.1 is our toString that we have to write. Now our toStrings are always functions, always public, and are always returning a string data type, and they won't have any parameters. Then they will give you in the paper a layout of what the string should look like. These here are the labels, and don't forget to put them in because there are marks allocated for labeling. The values that you see on the inside of these brackets mean they are fields from your class. You have the field fPlayer, fWeight, and fScore. So those would be your fields that you add to this. And then also because a toString as a function can only return one string, we will have to put #10s at the end of each line to be able to write the next line, weight, underneath name, and then the same for current score, we'll have to add a #10 there. And then they often give us an example here of output, but if they don't and you are unsure of what this string should look like, you can also go to question 3.2 and have a quick look at where the toString is called and what it would look like in the output object. So here is our signature for our toString. No parameters, it's a function, it's public, and it has a string data type. And here I am starting that first line with result is assigned to and then my label, plus the field name fPlayer name, and plus my #10 to make an enter. And the next two lines I'm building onto my string, as you would in string handling. In other words, this result here is currently equal to that, and I'm adding to that the label weight, and very important to use flow to string f. And if you have a look at that screenshot again, you will see that only one decimal point was showing. And then my #10 and my current score, and into string of fScore. You are now done with your class, and it's a good time to save, if you haven't done so before, and run your program. You will not see any output, but at least you can fix any syntax errors that you have in this class before you move on to your main form. Thank you for watching Dandelion Delphi tutorials. You can find more information about OOP in my third book of Dandelion Delphi. So in our next lesson, we're going to look at how to do question 3.2 of the final of 2019. So make sure you try it yourself before you watch the next video. Hope to see you soon.